Hi everyone, I'm Jillyfish. I may or may not be recording this inside of TOA, and I'm excited to bring you this week's Old School RuneScape recap. Raids 3 is the best! And I'll be starting with a lot of tweaks and fixes that have been made to make it an even more optimal experience.
But before Jillyfish gets started, it's Mod Goblin. I'm here to take over the recap a little bit. A lot of the changes that you're going to hear about in this video were detailed in a blog post that went out last Thursday. Usually the recaps come out on Fridays or Saturdays, and the nature of them is that if we have changes to make on a Friday, don't always make it into the recap. So a lot of the stuff you're going to see in this video wasn't received the best, and we spent some time on Friday making some more changes that I'd like to quickly go through. I'll link a blog post in the description explaining the changes that we made on Friday for hotfixes. The TLDR of those changes is that the Warden's HP during Phase 2 is about the same as it was when this video was made, but the base hit points of the core has been increased significantly, and the rate at which hit point scales with raid level has been decreased significantly. The other most important change to Warden's Phase 2 is that the core will now stay out for a longer period after each subsequent down. What that means in-game realistically is that you should probably expect to see no more than a 3 down, and coordinated groups making use of adrenaline, dragon daggers, etc. last hitting with Bandos Godswords are probably still pretty likely to see 2 downs if they're paying a lot of attention. Outside of that, we saw a bunch of feedback about the changes to the mid-raid loot system, and we made some more changes there. The most important of which being that liquid adrenaline now lasts for 150 seconds rather than 30 seconds, meaning you should be able to use one dose to cover even between 2 different boss rooms, or between phases of the Warden's fight, for example. The Chaos Pack for mid-raid loot should now occasionally offer doses of liquid adrenaline or ambrosia, so that it's a bit more of a tantalizing option rather than just picking power then life for a lot of people. The quantity of mid-raid loot offered in the life and Chaos Packs has been increased, such that you should likely expect to see a few more Nectars or Tears of Eladinis. The movement delay at the start of the Warden's third phase has been reduced. Some players felt that with ongoing server issues, they were being disproportionately punished and taking unavoidable damage at the start of Warden's P3. And that should about cover the changes that we made last Friday. There's a couple more that we outlined that we're expecting this week, so keep an eye out for the news post for that, and for Zoe Pancake's subsequent recap. Sorry for interrupting the video, let's get back to Jillyfish because she still covers a whole bunch of bug fixes and other tweaks that have not been changed since the update. Thanks a bunch.
Let's start with the bosses themselves. Hold on to your Crocs because the back's base hit points have been raised by 10%. During the fight, the base amount of jugs spawned has been increased by 2, and they roll 2 tiles further before stopping. Popping jugs no longer causes an attack delay, so you can hit Zabak immediately after popping them, but they do still respect the attack delay, so you may have to wait a delay after hitting Zabak to be able to touch the jugs. From person to person, Akka might be one of my favorite fights, but between me and you, and Akka, I'm really not a fan of the final phase with all the orbs, so I'm excited to see that at the end of the Akka fight, the orbs that spawned will now only deal full damage to 1 player, and the quantity of the orbs has been slightly reduced. To compensate, the base damage of the orbs during the enrage phase has been slightly increased. The max damage of the orbs is capped at 25 to prevent them from being overly punishing on higher raid levels. Hopefully, these orb changes make it more rewarding to dodge them instead of just taking them to the face. Also, Akka will change styles if he hasn't swapped for over 60 seconds. A tick-perfect kiting method called the butterfly method recently surfaced, allowing players to take no damage and avoid all of Akka's special attacks. Although Jagex doesn't want to completely patch it out, they also don't want it to be usable for the entire fight, because that can kind of take away any additional difficulty from higher invocations. Now let's quit monkeying around and get on to Baba. Bananas spawned via the Jungle Japes invocation now happen on monkey death rather than randomly, and they deal significantly reduced damage. Also, the damage done by individual projectiles from an open sarcophagus is no longer dealt in a 3x3 area. Prepare for trouble and make it double because the Wardens are seeing some changes too. The damage formula for Phase 2 has been adjusted to benefit less from accuracy and have a lower max ceiling. The amount of time that the core is exposed is also reduced. The amount of hit points that the wardens have during Phase 2 in high-scale groups has increased. There's been a reduction in the amount of damage dealt to the surviving warden when successfully clearing the Phase 3 skull mechanic. The base hit points of the surviving warden during Phase 3 have increased. The allowed duration for solving the skull mechanic during Phase 3 has been reduced. And the magic level of the surviving warden during Phase 3 has been reduced. These changes are meant to help balance the fight so the battle feels a little more back and forth. Now that we've covered the major boss changes, let's take a look at the paths leading up to them. Let out your ooh-ees and ooh-ahs because we'll be seeing reduced monkeys spawning in each wave on the path of Atmekan. The timings of waves have been adjusted to let them overlap more smoothly. By default, players will now receive 100 potions from the crate rather than 20. And completing the room will now delete a regular hammer from your inventory. Okay, bet. Now on to the path of Het. The health scaling of Het's seal has changed in group sizes to help with groups that have varied mining levels. During the raid, a friendly ghost offers you some care packages, and you may notice that now Ambrosia and Liquid Adrenaline are 1-dose potions. Liquid Adrenaline rarely shows up in the Chaos Pack. Ambrosia now only shows up in the Life Pack. The quantity of items provided in the Chaos Pack has been adjusted. Smelling salts restore more run energy, and the mid-raid loot interface no longer stops your movement, meaning you'll now be able to withdraw your supplies on the fly. We also have some general changes. Players can now boost to hit the prayer level requirement to create Elidinus's Ward, F. Players can now boost to hit the crafting level requirement to create the Divine Rune Pouch. The amount of AoE mechanics that stack with each other has been reduced, so walking into a Kefri bomb on a tile where 2 players once were will no longer result in taking double damage. Players using the On a Diet invocation will no longer be provided with silk dressings or honey locusts, and Monster Examine has been re-enabled within the Tombs of Amascut. There's been a slight reduction to the base drop chance for tradable uniques. Also, raid level will now have a stronger effect on the tradable unique drop rate. These changes should come after the weekend. There's a whole list of additional changes that came from your feedback, so I'll run through those pretty quickly to fully catch you up to speed. When you're in the mini monkey room, the duration for the venom pool was reduced from 30 seconds to 20 seconds. Players can no longer safe spot the Great Baboon using the fallen rubble in some positions, and they are no longer able to get stuck inside a big rock when fighting her. Those players were really stuck between a rock and a hard place. Our favorite crocodile will now properly reset following a wipe, no more getting swept away on re-entry, and Kefri no longer regenerates HP during the final phase. In the Path of Het, placing 2 mirrors in the same location no longer deletes one of the mirrors. Mirrors are no longer able to be pushed into some walls. And damage dealt to Het's seal now scales properly with the tier of pickaxe you're using. Now this is important because you can store a pickaxe inside the raid if you want to save yourself an inventory space, and that includes a charged crystal pickaxe, which are now able to be deposited. And in the fight with Akka, a bug was fixed where his orbs were not spawning correctly for the enraged phase. In the final fight, max hits on the Warden's cores during the encounter's second phase are now only guaranteed with melee weapons. NPCs such as thralls or pets will no longer appear on top of the skulls that spawn periodically throughout the final phase of the Warden's encounter. Players will no longer find themselves blocked from completing the raid if they die at the same time as the final Warden. That's just unlucky. Tumeken's Shadow now only grants its passive magic attack and magic damage bonuses to its inbuilt spell and not to other spells. The bonuses were incorrectly applying to other spells in PvM scenarios. And then outside of the raid, but in terms of the invocation system, Seer Doman Brews are no longer disabled by the On a Diet invocation, but honey locusts and silk dressings are still considered food by this invocation. Also, a bug was fixed where players who are using a certain plugin on RuneLite would occasionally turn invisible when using blessed crystal scarabs. In addition, Grand Exchange clerks will now display the values of new items added alongside Tombs of Amascut. Pieces of Armadillo armor now break down into the correct amount of Armadillion plates so that way you can fortify your Missouri armor. And you can see the plate conversions here. Additionally, the Divine Rune Pouch can now be picked up from the ground. Ultimate Irons who have looted a Thread of Eldonus can carry on using their Place of Death as a morbid storage option for their upgraded pouch. Also, they're investigating reports of lag and server instability to make improvements so that we can all continue to enjoy Raids 3. Now that you're all up to date with what changed last week, let's have a look at what we're doing today. 1-dose variants of Nectar and Tears of Elidinus are more visually distinct. The Infernal Max Cape no longer has an unusual graphical interaction with Tumekin's Shadow. The Missouri Mask no longer has any graphical issues when worn with Tumekin's Shadow or Asmumpton's Fang. The MVP board has had some adjustments made so that players see a wider spread of the various titles. Blocking was added so players cannot melee Zabak without risking being meleeed back. Zabak's Roar can no longer knock players into safe spots at the edges of the room. Jugs should no longer roll through rocks in Zabak's fight. And jugs should more reliably explode on contact with a rock. A bug was fixed where the Arcane Scarab was nulling damage in some instances. Another bug was fixed where the Arcane Scarab was teleporting immediately after firing. The exploding scarabs between Kefri's shield phases should now detonate more consistently. A bug was fixed where players could click through the Warden's Phase 1 obelisk. And the tile push during Warden's Phase 3 no longer pushes players into the terrain. That's all for our tweaks so far. Let's move on to some celebration. In last week's recap, Poison Potion shared with us our world's first. Here they are again, just in case you missed them. We have our world's first completion as a team on normal, and our world's first solo on expert. And all of these players will be receiving 12 months of membership to their in-game inbox. Congratulations to all of our world's first runners. And now that we're getting comfortable with TOA, it's time to go fast. The Tombs of Amascut route races will be a speedrunning competition for each of the 4 paths in the normal mode version of the raid. Record yourself completely clearing one of the 4 routes, and the fastest team for each of the 4 races will receive 2 months membership for each member. There's a form in this week's update with more details, and a link to where you'll be able to submit the video of your clear. Now, I know we're all just here for Raids 3, but here are a few more changes outside of TOA. Jagex fixed a bug allowing players to access total level worlds without meeting the required total level, and they fixed a bug that prevented the Rune Throne Axe special attacks from working correctly at the door supports on Waterbirth Island. Also, the PvP rota has moved to Period B, which you can see here. Note that World 390 for LMS Competitive has been deactivated with this rota, and the PvP arena is now using pure loadouts in ranked tournaments this week. And that wraps it up for this week. Thanks for tuning in. I'm sending RNG to each and every one of you. Here's to hope for purples during your raids.